Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with another one of the endless series of box sets that everybody seems to be issuing. Now, this is a set, let's look at it here. Rafael Kubelik, the Munich Symphonic recordings on Orfeo. I reviewed this originally on ClassicsToday.com when it came out, and I thought I would take it out and give it another spin because I see that, wonder of wonders, it's still available. So we might as well talk about it here too. There are some extraordinary things in here, along with some less extraordinary things. But it's very, very interesting to see how they shake down. This box does not contain, by the way, all of Kubelik's Munich symphonic recordings. I suppose it does if you define symphonic as not including concertos, because there are some excellent concerto recordings in here. There was a Brahms violin concerto with Heinrich Schering. There was the Beethoven piano concertos with Rudolf Serkin. It would have been so nice if those had been added. It really would have. But they're not. And even all the symphonic stuff isn't in here. There was a Handel Concerto Grosso. There were a few other things. For some reason, they didn't make it into the box. What did make it into the box, and it's really fascinating to see what is the good stuff and the bad stuff, is his studio recordings for Orfeo, and then his live recordings that were on the Orfeo door, the red label stuff versus the black label stuff. And almost without exception, the live stuff is vastly more attractive and interesting than the black label studio stuff. So it's almost 100%, which means that this box is like half and half. Half really cool and half not so cool. None of it is terrible. Kubelik was too good a musician for that. But some of it is boring, which is a bad thing. So let's go through all 15 discs, as we always do, one at a time, and I'll tell you what the good stuff is and the less good stuff. All right. We start with a couple discs of Haydn and Mozart. Yeah, you get Haydn 99, and then Mozart 25, 38, 40, and 41. Typical big band, none too interesting Haydn and Mozart. It's that simple. Nicely played, warm, pleasant, but not in any way extraordinary. And, of course, as time has gone on, and the period instrument people have popped up, and different approaches to this music have become more current, they only tend to sound a little bit more dated in terms of their interpretive approach. Now, of course, had they been fabulous, like some of Bruno Walters or George Zell's or some of those people, we wouldn't be saying this. But they were just good, middle-of-the-road performances of their type. And, that may or may not interest you, depending on how you feel about Kubelik. Beethoven Nine, with Helen Donat, Brigitte Fassbender, Horst Laubenthal, and Hans Sultan. Again, not great. A good, solid, go to the symphony, have a nice evening performance, but not in any particular way special. And then we get the Brahms Symphonies. And see, these are all the studio things. Brahms Symphonies 1, 2, 3, 4. Boring. Just boring. Simply and entirely boring. I wish I could say otherwise, but as a group, they are almost entirely without interest. And, go listen for yourself if you don't believe me. And we're already now up to disc number 7. But things are improving. We have the Dvorak Sixth coupled with the Serenade for strings. This is an amazing, fabulous Dvorak Sixth. Absolutely spectacular. Amazingly wonderful. I am not kidding. It is one of the great Dvorak Sixths in the history of the universe. You have all of the excitement and rhythmic fire of his Berlin Philharmonic recording on Deutsche Grammophon, including the fabulous offbeat timpani in the scherzo. It's going pow, pow, pow. I played that timpani part. It's a ball. It's just a blast. It really is. But in addition to that, you have a certain warmth and a rubato and a freedom and a flexibility, everything you look for in a live performance. It's a knockout, and you have to hear it. And the Serenade for strings is, of course, just lovely. I mean, perfectly lovely, nothing wrong with it. Dvorak Symphony number 7 with the Wind Serenade. Again, really, really fine performances. The Seventh is a big, dark, heavy, implacable as doom kind of performance with a really, really well-paced and smartly done finale. It's absolutely first class and better than his DG recording with the Berlin Philharmonic. So that's also worth having. Then we have Dvorak Symphony number 8 coupled with the New World. Now, Kubelik always did a great New World, and this is a great New World. It's first class and very, very enjoyable, but not all that different from his studio recording. The 8th, on the other hand, is a bit of a letdown. It's really rather mannered, which is odd for Kubelik. You know, he had his good days and bad days, and this is not such a good day, especially the third movement, the scherzo, which is terribly heavy-handed. It's just, I mean, he knows the piece well. He does adorable things to it in places, but as a whole, it does not compare to his DG studio recording. So that's the one disappointment in these live Dvorak ones. Then we get 2 Bruckner symphonies, and here's where things really get interesting. You get the 8th, which is a total non-happening. Surprisingly, it's paced properly, more or less. The adagio maybe is a bit on the quick side, but it just doesn't have anything memorable happening in it. It's Bruckner's 8th. You would never know, hearing it, that anything special is going on at all. But the 9th, the 9th. This is one of the most personal, fabulous performances of Bruckner's 9th you've ever heard. And by the way, all of these, or most of them, were reviewed on ClassicsToday.com, in addition to the big box. So you can see the individual reviews there and hear samples if they were insider reviews and you're an insider. So, you know, I would really advise you to go back and look at the ones that you're really curious about. This Bruckner 9th is extraordinary for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has a lot of the passion and spontaneity and savagery of the famous Joachim Staatskapelle Dresden recording, even the scherzo, which is just a powerhouse. It's great. But the adagio is fascinating, and this is why. You know, the big cosmic sound part, you know, the noise, ba-da-da-dum, wa-dum, wah, with the horns, it's amazing. Well, normally, that is played against tremolo strings, just this shimmery, unmeasured, tremolo. But Kubelik does not play it that way. Kubelik plays the entire string passage every time it reappears, every time in measured, I think there are 128th notes, or maybe 64ths or something, but he measures them out. And the reason is because he noticed that when the strings take over the melody from the sound, you know, because they go ya da 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 ba da 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 ba da da, right? Those are the same note value as Bruckner uses to notate the tremolo. So technically, it is possible to play that passage entirely in measured note values. And the sound is totally different when you have behind all the, folderol that's going on top, and like that. And I'm going to play it for you because it is really amazing. No one ever did it that way. It is a legitimate, perfectly valid way to do it, but I don't think it's correct necessarily. I think Bruckner probably meant tremolo because Bruckner was the tremolo guy. But wow, what a difference it makes. Here, have a listen. Isn't that remarkable? And the only single problem with this performance is that the horns crack on the very last phrase of the adagio. And you just are waiting for the fabulous transcendental ending, and they go, eek! And you go, Oh, they didn't. They didn't do that. I didn't hear that. It's such a pity. But I mean, it doesn't destroy the value of the entire performance. You just have to suck it up and deal with it. And so I know you will. Boy, it's worth hearing. It's just fantastic. Then we get the Symphony Fantastique and the Corsair Overture. Very good, solid, middle-of-the-road performances, but again, not extraordinary, not hugely memorable. Everybody sort of hauls out the Symphony Fantastique when they have to do something by Berlioz. It's such a tough piece to do. Such a difficult work to interpret. And everybody does it. Most people don't do it terribly well. Kubelik does it well. Like everything he does is very musical. It's very intelligent. It's just not one of the great Fantastiques. But you're not going to be upset that you have it. The Corsair Overture could be peppier. No question about that. But anyway, then we have the Mavlast. That was a studio recording, this Mavlast. And I got to say, it's not his best, but he never did it badly. I mean, he always did a good Mavlast. It was sort of his signature piece, especially since he left Czechoslovakia. His best Mavlast is the Boston Symphony one on DG. His second best is probably the Return to Czechoslovakia one, partly for historical reasons, but it's also definitely an inspired performance by the occasion, and it's live, and it's great. This one is kind of middle of the road and decent. Again, decent, but it's one of the studio recordings. It's not one of the live ones. Then we get a really cool live one. You get the Janacek Sinfonietta in a fantastic performance of that. I mean, and all the more remarkable because the trumpets never blow it. Remember, you have 14 trumpets in this piece, which makes the infinitude the number of chances they have to crack something in the fanfares at the beginning and the end, but they do really, really well. And it's just as exciting as his DG recording and better sounding. And then Carl Amadeus Hartmann, his Symphonic Hymns for large orchestra. This is a big 3-movement work of symphonic proportions. You're not going to find it anywhere else. And it's well done. It's very well done. It's a slightly older performance. I think it dates from when was it from? Is this 81? Well, it's not so bad. And it's, Kubelik was a proponent of Hartmann's music throughout his career. And Hartmann is a really, really good composer. He deserves a box of some kind because it's a little bit mysterious what he actually wrote, because there were his pre-World War II and post-World War II pieces, and he destroyed a lot of his stuff and reworked a lot of the other stuff, and it's all spread out. There was a symphony cycle that Ingo Metzmacher did on EMI, which is now Warner, which is now out of print, so it doesn't matter. But it really would be good to have someone dedicate some serious time and attention to Hartmann, an important and deeply moving and expressive composer. And it's really good to have this in here. It really, really is. And then finally, on disc 15, very interesting coupling. The Bartók Music for Strings, Percussion, and Celesta, and the Concerto for Orchestra. Now, Kubelik did the reference recording of the Concerto for Orchestra. Again, it's his DG recording with the Boston Symphony, which is just unspeakably magnificent. And I said so in my video on the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra. But he also did a great music for strings, percussion, and celesta for Mercury, but it was in mono. And this one's in stereo. And although the playing has a couple moments of shakiness here and there, just a little bit, it's a live performance, it is a knockout. An absolute knockout. It is so expressively intense, so gripping. The slow movement particularly, which he takes at Bartók's metronome marking. It really is very quick, but wow, does it really prove that Bartók had a point, because it will just seize you by the throat. Remember, that's the music that Stanley Kubrick used in The Shining, like when the blood's coming down the elevator and like huge buckets and all that creepiness is going on. It's that movement. And boy, is this a gut-wrencher of a performance. I'm going to play you that moment too. You got to hear this. This is just an expressionist horror show in the best sense of the term. It's just wonderful. I mean, unquestionably, this is one of the great recordings of the music for strings. That's what it is, percussion and celesta. And with that, we come to the end of these 15 discs, which are such a mixed bag. But if the price is right, you may want to get the box because the individual stuff may be impossible to find. And the great stuff is really, really, really great. And none of it is awful. You're not going to hate anything. I don't think you're going to play his Brahms more than once when there's so much great Brahms out there. But I do think that these, the Dvoraks, the Janacek, the Hartmann, the Bruckner Nine, this Bartók disc, there's some amazing stuff that really shows Kubelik at his very, very best. He was a hot and cold conductor. He really was. He was a spontaneous guy. And there were times when he was really on and times when he was less on. That's just what he was. But at his best, he was extraordinary. It's a real shame, though, that this box doesn't have, the stuff that some of his greatest stuff, for example, is in the Opera House. He was an amazing Wagner conductor. I mean, remember his Meistersinger, his Parsifal, his Lohengrin. He was a tremendous Wagner conductor. And there's no Wagner in here. It's a pity. Some of his strengths are not always in the usual Czech Slavic repertoire stuff. He really did a lot of extraordinary other music as well. And I wish that there were an opportunity to savor some of that in a complete set or some way that would make it easier for us to appreciate some of the things he did in those other realms. Remember his Hindemith Mathister Mahler recording. He did some remarkable music. Fitzner's Palestrina, if you like Palestrina, which I'll never forget my friend Bob described as Parsifal without the laughs. But he did all that music, and he did it extremely well. He was so sympathetic as a conductor of opera and theatrical music as well. He had many gifts. Not all of them are represented ideally in any single set, and they're not all represented ideally in this set. But the stuff that's great, like I said, is imperishably great. So that's the deal. It's up to you now. Listen to some of it, see what you think if you can. Anyway, keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.